Crochet myths and misconceptions are rampant on the internet, especially when it comes to crocheted garments. So are they fact or are they fiction? In today's video, we're going to talk about those common myths, especially ones that relate to garment making because that's my jam, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion about how I feel about them. But before we hop into it, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Courtney. I'm a size-inclusive crochet designer, and I'd really love for you to like this video and give my channel a follow if you like crochet, you like free patterns, and you like vlog style videos, because that's what I'm all about here. All right, let's hop right in with the one that I think is the most common and the most commonly misconcepted. Is that a word? Probably not. And that is that crochet can only create thick, non-drapey, non-breathable, hot fabric. And sure, if we're comparing knit and crochet, crochet fabric made with the same weight of yarn is going to be a little bit thicker than something that is knit in the same weight of yarn. See where I'm going with this? The anatomy of crocheted stitches means that most of the stitches are like 2 yarns thick, whereas with knitting, the anatomy of the stitches is that most of the stitches between the outside world and your body is only 1 yarn thickness. So there's a little bit of fact to this myth, but that is because people are making mistakes in their yarn choices. So in order to achieve that same thinness of fabric, that same drape of the fabric, we need to be crocheting with lighter weight yarns. I'll say it again for the people in the back. We need to be crocheting with lighter weight yarns when it comes to garments. If you want your crocheted piece of clothing to fit like a sewn piece of clothing or like a knitted piece of clothing, you're going to have to do it in a thinner weight of yarn. And this is nothing against like worsted and bulky weight garments. I have a fair number of them, and there's a time and a place for them, and you can still make a worsted weight yarn drapey and a bulky weight yarn drapey. They'll just never be as thin as a sewn garment. Worsted weight yarn is just thicker than most fabrics to begin with, and then when we crochet with it, we're making it double thick. So that's just an unrealistic expectation of crochet. So when we crochet with thinner weights of yarn, it's not going to give us a fabric that is too thin to wear. We're still doubling it up while we make our stitches, right? So when we're comparing a knit fabric to a crochet fabric, I think it's more fair to compare, say, a DK weight sweater in knit to a fingering weight sweater in crochet, or a worsted weight sweater in knit to a DK weight in crochet. And I recognize that there's a lot of hesitation, especially from crocheters, to use those lighter weights of yarn. They do take more time. But if your goal is to end up with a garment that is lightweight and feels more like a knitted garment or feels more like a sewn garment, you're gonna have to go lower in those yarn weights. Briefly, because I can hear the comment section already, let's talk a little bit more about worsted and bulky weight yarns. You can still achieve great drape with a worsted weight yarn. You might just need to accept the fact that it needs to be more holey. So maybe it's something that will always have a t-shirt underneath or a camisole underneath. In order to achieve a nice drape on a worsted weight sweater, you are going to have to loosen up that gauge a little bit to allow those stitches to move more. Yarn weights are not the only thing that can impact the crocheted garment feeling like a cardboard box in the end. We can also talk a little bit about fiber. So we want to be using fibers that have more drape when we're crocheting because our stitches don't have the same flexibility as knit stitches. So you want to be using a silkier, smoother fiber than maybe you would in knitting. This doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a natural fiber. I do always recommend crocheting our garments in natural fibers because it tends to give you better drape than a synthetic fiber. But there are some really silky smooth synthetic yarns out there. One of my personal favorites is Peyton's Canadiana. It is 100% acrylic, and that thing is smooth like butter, super silky. You can achieve amazing drape with it. With this comes kind of a mini myth, and the mini myth is that you have to use either the exact same yarn or the exact same fiber that the designer used when you're recreating the pattern. This one is a big fiction. You do not. You can use any fiber of yarn that gets you the correct blocked gauge for your garments. You do not need to use superwash wool just because the designer used superwash wool. You don't need to use cotton just because the designer used cotton. You can use any fiber you like. The only rule is that you use the same weight of yarn and achieve the proper blocked gauge. If you want to know more about yarn choice or about getting blocked gauge, I have YouTube videos on each of those topics. I'll link them in the description below. And how do we know if one fiber or one yarn is going to give us that drape that we want? The best way is to swatch. We're going to make up that swatch, block it, get the correct gauge, and see how it drapes. Give the swatch a little wiggle. Is it moving nicely? Is it flowing like fabric, or is it flapping in the wind like paper or cardboard? There's your answer. So when it comes to the myth or misconception that crochet clothing is too hot, too stiff, unwearable, I am calling that one false. That is fiction, absolutely. Another myth or misconception is that you need to follow a pattern exactly as it's written, exactly as the designer did it, using the same number of rows and the same number of stitches in the same order. But that is also false. Fiction. You do not. A pattern is a starting platform for you to do what you like and what you need based on your style, your wants and needs, and your unique body. So sometimes you're going to need to add a few stitches here or subtract a few stitches there. Designers are doing the best that they can based off of standardized sizing, but no one's body is a perfect standard size. We come in all different shapes and sizes, even within that one size category. So don't be afraid to go off script. Another common misconception about crochet that drives me up the wall is that crochet is all kitschy or tacky or granny or cottagecore. Well, it can be. I beg to differ because I have designed over 150 things that I don't think are that tacky, kitschy, granny, cottagecore vibe at all. That being said, I am leaning into the kitschy a little bit more in 2026, so I do have a couple designs that are a little bit more of that classic crochet granny style. But if that's not your jam, I totally understand because it hasn't really been my jam up until now either. And that's why I've worked really hard with my designs to make them what you think crochet isn't capable of. Crochet isn't capable of great drape. Crochet isn't capable of looking store-bought. Crochet isn't capable of the things that knitting or sewn garments are capable of. That has been my mission. And when I hear somebody saying that crochet can only be that like kitschy granny stuff, it kind of offends me because I've worked so hard to create crochet projects that aren't that. And again, neither is better or worse, but when you say it's only that and I'm over here doing this, it's frustrating for me. I think my business is a testament to that myth being busted for sure. Now, this one applies to crochet kind of outside of the garment world, but I feel it very intensely in the crochet garment world as well. And that is, crochet isn't as good as knitting, or it isn't as pristine as knitting. It isn't as expensive as knitting. It's just like cheaper or less than. It's not as good as. There's an air of having your nose up in the air, and crochet, we look down upon it. And I'm not here for that. Crochet is capable of so many things. Can it do all the things that knitting does? No. But you know what else? Knitting can't do all the things that crochet does either. And this is not me hating on knitting. This is me saying there's a time and a place for each of these crafts, and they are not hierarchical in any way. They are different, separate crafts, no different than scrapbooking or painting or any other hobby or craft out there. And if we want to talk about crochet being cheaper than knitting or looking cheaper than knitting, we will have to have a conversation about the fact that crochet uses more yarn than knitting. Again, because we're making basically like a double thick fabric when we crochet. So Crochet actually is more expensive than knitting in that way. But if you think that crochet isn't as versatile as knitting, or it isn't as good as knitting, or if you're trying to place any value judgment on crochet versus knitting, if you think crochet is less versatile or it's cheaper or a lower craft, that's when we're gonna have words. We're gonna fight a little bit, because it's just not. They are equal and different. And that's okay. So that is another myth busted. Now the next myth is something that I think kind of hits the knitting world as well. And that is that crocheted and knitted garments don't fit plus size folks as well as they fit straight size folks. And I'm here to tell you that not only is that false, that is fiction, but it is likely caused by lazy designing. I said it. I have some of those designs in my past as well too, and I'm working on updating them and fixing them, or just removing them from my store altogether. But there are certain things that need to be included and graded differently for plus sizes than straight sizes. For a straight size, say from extra small through to large, you might be able to get away with sewing 2 rectangles together and calling it a top. But with plus size folks, that doesn't work. If you end up accommodating for their bust size and you're just sewing together 2 rectangles, their drop shoulder is going to be at their elbow, but then maybe on a small or extra small, it's only an inch off the shoulder. And that's not fair. We're not getting the same result from the same pattern. It no longer is the same pattern because it's not fitting the same in the result. So that's where things like underarm shaping get worked into truly size inclusive designs. So for example, like my circle yoke sweaters, when I am splitting off for the body and sleeves, if I just worked the stitches on the front and then skipped the sleeve stitches and then worked the stitches on the back, I've got no 3-dimension in those underarms, right? Like we've just put the front and touched it to the back. But even straight size folks are not 2-dimensional like that, right? We have a 3rd dimension. We have depth to our bodies, and we need to account for that depth proportionally as the sizes go up. So for me, I'm incorporating stitches in the underarm, and the number of stitches reflects the size as well too. So if I'm doing 8 stitches on an extra small, I'm not also doing 8 stitches on a 5X. That isn't proportional to their bodies. I could go on and on about shaping and grading for size inclusivity for days. I'm sure there will be another YouTube video about that one day soon, but for today, just know that there are designers out there who are accommodating for the differences in our bodies across sizes, and if you're not sure if a pattern contains those elements, reach out to the designer and ask. That way you're not disappointed when you've created 2 rectangles that don't fit your non-rectangular body. So when it comes to the myth that crocheted and knitted clothing can't fit plus size bodies the same way that it does for straight size bodies, that one is false. It does take some work on the designer's part, but it is absolutely possible to get a similar looking result across different body types for the vast majority of garments. Then the next one is a short and sweet one. It's that you're not a real crocheter if you can't read patterns or you can't read charts or anything of the like. There is a whole other language to learn when you are trying to read a crochet pattern, and then a whole other language to learn if you are trying to read crochet charts. It is an unrealistic expectation that a beginner crocheter is going to step into this world and understand the hundreds of different short forms that it uses and the hundreds of different symbols that it uses. It is a lot to learn, so whether you are just beginning crocheting or you've been crocheting for years and still don't read patterns, that doesn't mean you're not a real crocheter. The only things that are required to be a real crocheter are a hook and some yarn. And for you to use that hook and yarn to make some stitches. Okay, one last one, and this is just my own personal belief, and I know that this is something that a lot of people disagree with. I am a believer that when it comes to crocheted clothing, there is almost never a right side and a wrong side. Exceptions include things like lace and color work, anything that has floats on the inside, sure, fine. But the vast majority of crocheted garments, whether they are worked in the round, continuous rounds, or whether they are turned, I don't think that there's really a right side or wrong side. Whatever side you think looks better to you is the right side. A sweater like this, you could wear it inside out, outside right, doesn't matter. All right, so now it's your turn. What are some other crochet myths and misconceptions that you've heard, and do you believe them? Are they fact? Are they fiction? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more educational crochet content, vlog style videos, and free pattern tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. Happy crocheting. Bye-bye.